Just Picture It looks at the how of leadership. I'm Fung. Leaders know the value of trust, innovation, and emotional intelligence in achieving success and satisfaction at work. Rob Reindl has a track record of building a highly effective workforce in a fast-growing company, and he has learned how to unleash the potential of individuals, teams, and organizations. The How of Leadership is a new book that distills and presents his findings in short, succinct chapters with crisp graphics that help you with valuable inspiration and motivation every day. As the Corporate Vice President for Human Resources at Edwards Life Sciences for nearly 13 years, Rob played a key role in the development of the company's culture during its pivotal years of growth. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Malin.
Eileen Clegg is founder and principal of 10-year-old Visual Insight. She creates live visuals for strategy and learning. Eileen started the Visual Insight Press in January 2014, launching Rob's book on the How of Leadership. Eileen was a daily news journalist for 20 years and has written numerous books and articles and has been affiliated with the Institute for the Future, conducting research on learning since 1999. She has brought writing and art together to create a unique approach to visual journalism. Welcome, Eileen. Welcome back.
Thank you, Malin, for having me back.
Now, how did the two of you start working together, you and Rob?
I was on the faculty of Edwards Life Sciences Leadership program because Edwards was an early adopter of using visuals for executive leadership groups as a way of thinking together. So of course I had an opportunity to watch Rob working with these leaders through the years as this company grew, and I could see that the human systems that he brought to bear were really part of the engine of this company's growth, and I just had to know more, so I really pressured him to get it down on paper, and we worked together to do that over the past year.
Rob, tell us about the Edwards Life Sciences story. How did it happen?
Well, Edwards Life Sciences is a spin-off from a larger company, Baxter Healthcare. We spun off in April of 2000. It is the #1 heart valve company in the world. We became that shortly after spin. Very innovative company that grew from like $750 million to $1.3 billion in revenue during my time there. The interesting thing about innovation there is we invented a technology called the transcatheter heart valve, which enables physicians to place an aortic valve crimped into a catheter through the femoral artery and have your aortic valve replaced versus having your chest cracked open, which is typically the way the surgical procedure works. So excellent leadership also played a big role in that growth engine. We developed a program called Edwards Life Sciences Leadership Program in 2001 that really became the framework for us in teaching leaders how we wanted them to lead our people going forward.
Rob, you know, we cannot help but notice the graphic behind you about weaving trust. And it seems that weaving trust must have been a very integral part of Edwards Life Sciences. Tell us a bit about how trust played a role, and how do we prove worthy of trust in growing a company?
Yeah, you know, in my research on trustworthiness, I found that there was 4 elements that were really critical to proving you're worthy of someone else's trust. First one is, how much do we know one another? I mean, that's very important because it facilitates trust. It makes it easier for it to evolve. The second component of trust is, do we demonstrate behaviors that show we care? You can see that part of the graphic here. The third element is, to what extent do we follow through on our commitments and actually do what we say we're going to do, take responsibility and follow through on the things that we said we're going to do. And then the last element is, do we share information openly? Do we tell the truth along the way?
Thank you, Rob. Now, let's talk about this picture. Eileen, how does it work to bring images and ideas together? What role do these pictures play in helping to foster the culture of trust within Edwards Life Sciences?
Well, I think that the imagery really helps in general today because we're more and more visual, and we need compressed communication to convey ideas. So that's one reason why we've used the visuals to carry forward these really essential ideas. And this visual that we just looked at is an example of a metaphor that helps us think about something sort of abstract, such as trust. When we think of it as a tapestry, as a fabric, threads woven together, that if one of those breaks, that you really lose the fabric. So we begin seeing sort of a visual of how trust works. Each intersection is important, whether that's telling the truth, whether it's sharing more of ourselves, being vulnerable, all the ways we're trusting. Those are all weaving threads together. So that visual metaphor helps us hold that idea.
Well, seeing that Edwards Life Sciences is dealing with actual products that go into people's bodies, I'm relieved to know that there is a trustworthy company behind producing these things. Rob, would you like to tell us a little bit about how the culture of trust within Edwards Life Sciences can prove reassuring to the customers of your products?
Sure. I mean, you're right? We're inventing technologies that are going to go into human bodies, right? So it's critical, actually, right? So what we're talking about here is the importance of the different functions within the organization to be able to work together effectively and complement each other's expertise and work together. So for example, marketing goes out and determines what's the need out there in the marketplace. They bring that information back to the engineers. Engineers design the product. They have to pass it on to manufacturing. Manufacturing manufactures a product, and then it finally goes to sales. So bringing all those different functions in earlier so that they don't get the product thrown over to the fence to them, or you don't really care about what the other functions need or want as part of the process. That's not the way to design a good product that's going to go into human bodies. You need to listen and make sure that you're working together effectively across functions.
Thank you. I think the whole idea of trust is so critical whenever we're dealing with products or services that involve people's bodies and human beings. We are complex. And so, I'm reminded of the Space Challenger issue when the Challenger blew up, and it was because people wouldn't speak about the problems that they knew about. Let's bring up the next graphic. I think you've identified, Rob, an area that is so critical, that an essential part of your culture of trust is actually being able to listen to people. Tell us a bit about that and how that works.
Exactly. It's kind of interesting. You think, well, listening, very easy skill, but less than 25% of people in organizations really listen effectively. What a shame that is, right? And so we knew that. We got after that. And so we did different things where we said, we're going to seek the advice of people down in the organization because they might have some valuable input. Even though we as executives and more experienced leaders had all the experience, and we might go about our leadership and say, well, we know this, we don't need to ask them. No. You might get some gem of knowledge from people down in the organization. And so it's really important to involve them. I mean, the story that we did early on was to involve the middle managers in getting them involved in determining what should be the major components of our leadership program that we talked about earlier.
In fact, Eileen, this is why visuals began to play a more and more important part in the leadership program at Edwards Life Sciences.
Yeah, one of the stories, and Rob and I have discussed a lot, the evolution of his listening to these new leaders. So we're gathering new leaders in this program and giving them an opportunity to use visuals to tell their story, ask questions, whatever they want to ask, bring up any issues they want to, and then Rob would come and sit, and as they went through the graphics of their questions, listen, hear everything they had to say, and answer any questions. So that became one of the tools that we used for really deep listening.
Let's bring up the next graphic. I think this issue that you are tackling head on, both of you, in this brilliant book about silence and listening to the silence, but also noting when people fall silent, the silent spiral. Eileen, tell me about the images and ideas in the silent spiral.
So we were just talking about silence being a positive thing when leaders are listening. Silence is a negative thing when people stop speaking. And this visual of the silent spiral shows the sun, sort of the aspirational moment when people are feeling they can speak up. That's how people reach their aspirations. If they aren't heard, then they stop speaking. First time, maybe they'll speak up again, but the idea is this spiral is that each time people are not heard, then they become more silent. They're not contributing any longer to the organization. So the spiral is that, you know, becoming bigger and more challenging to the organization.
So let's take a look at the silent spiral and turn over to Rob. So Rob, how has the silent spiral played out in teams, and how has correcting that helped the innovation and growth of Edward Life Sciences?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite visuals, actually, right? And so the way it plays out is that we're sitting in a group meeting as a team. Someone has an idea that might be different than the boss, right? And all of a sudden, they bring up the idea, and the boss dismisses him or her in the meeting. Embarrasses them in front of their team. The next time that team gets together, you can bet that the silent spiral has started, right? And it just, once you go silent one time, you tend to go silent many times, and then you ultimately say, you know what, I'm not going to challenge the boss anymore in meetings. One of the things that we came up with to get after this was a competency in our organization called creative debate. What we meant by that was when two or more people get together to solve a problem, it's really important that we allow for debate. Debate is not like in high school and in college where you have a winner and a loser, and this is no more like listening to each other and building on each other's ideas. So after debate, you get more creative ideas than two or more people came to the table with. Creative ideas lead to innovation, and innovation was really the cornerstone of the Edward strategy. We were out to create innovative technologies to meet unsolved clinical needs. So
Rob, the silent spiral makes me think about what happens if your customers go down the silent spiral.
Great.
I think it's brilliant for you to be thinking about this internally, because if your employees are treated well and listened to, it seems more natural that they would listen to their customers. Did that happen?
Absolutely. So in a medical technology company, customers always have ideas. And it'd be really easy to say, well, we know because we're the corporate office, we're the ones that develop all these technologies, we know what's best for the patients. No, the physicians are the people working with the patients every single day. And they think about different ways that we might be able to tweak an existing technology, or even better yet, come up with a new approach to actually doing it. So listening to those inputs that come from the physician to the sales rep, back to our corporate office, back to our R&D group is really important going forward.
So let's take a look at the next graphic, which touches on what you mentioned, inventions and innovations. Mm-hmm. I will turn back to Eileen. Tell us about this. I love the picture of the people going around hugging.
Well, here in Silicon Valley, we know about geniuses. So you have an individual, and what we're trying to show is that the individual genius holding onto that light bulb, it's not enough. The light bulb goes dull, it cracks, it's not able to really generate, move throughout the society or an organization. To do that, you need a team. So we show the light bulb with a group around it, and it's sort of like what we would call at IFTF, it was the innovation system. Many, many roles and many, many players, and that's something that Edwards really has down because they're a very innovative company.
So the you mentioned IFTF, the Institute for the Future, mm-hmm. where you were a visual journalist and worked on learning since 1999. I think you've brought a lot of that to a specific fast-growing company. Rob, tell us, what's the difference between inventions and innovations?
That's a great question, Marlene. I mean, inventions are really, things that inventors come up with. It's the individual sport that you see here. Many inventions never become innovations, actually, in companies, right? It's only when the inventor, as Eileen mentioned, lets go and lets it become a team sport. And in organizations, what that means is all the different functional expertise start to get involved. As I mentioned earlier, R&D, manufacturing, sales, And then also the people outside the company, right? Let the customers sometimes be a part of taking an invention and making it an innovation. One of the cool things that we did in our company was to actually create a separate group called the Advanced Technology Group. It was where our top secret stuff was being done, that were going to be the future technologies for the company. That was after we acquired a company, and rather than letting the founder go, we let them stay in the company, created a niche for them to actually be like their own little startup within our company and continue to grow different new technologies.
Wow. I love this idea that a life science company thinks of innovation as a team sport. Mm-hmm. Because innovation, when you work with the human body, you're dealing with some pretty sensitive stuff. Yep. We never know what impact any device or any instrument might have on such a complex system. I think it is really impossible for one person to think of everything that can happen. Yeah. It makes me much more relieved that there's a whole team looking at all the different perspectives that you need, different angles of understanding. This brings us to another place, which is that it must be very stressful to work to know that if you make a mistake, somebody could die. Mm-hmm. Why is it so important in this book that the two of you have created, the choice of stress? Let's bring up the next graphic. Eileen, let's turn to you. What is this choice related to stress?
Well, when we see the graphic, I really like this. I also wanted to acknowledge Ellen Loveridge, who helped with creating these. What we have in this picture is two people in your mind. And one person, there's a lightning bolt, grabs the lightning bolt, gets stressed. The other person steps aside, and there's a lightning rod catching it instead of the person. So really the idea is, in any situation, there's a choice. It's not always the stressor that we blame, it's really our reactions, which Rob actually had some wisdom about that, has really affected me personally as well as professionally, that there is always a choice, and certainly within the company that's important, critical.
So Rob, let's turn back to you. How is stress a choice as a competence? How does that affect Edward Life Sciences as a company in being a solid, sustainably growing company?
We know not only were we a growing company, but in order to keep that growth, you got to continue to be innovative, right? And so we were also a publicly traded company, so it's really important to not only have a strategic plan, but also have quarterly results for your shareholders as well. So how do we deal with all that stress that we're facing along the way in doing that? Well, we had our executives get to understand that, you know what, all these stressors, the governmental agencies, the conflict that we might have with another individual, a person or a team not performing, all those kinds of things are really the stressors, as Eileen mentioned. But ultimately, it's your choice as a leader as to how you want to react to those stressors that really causes the stress. And so that was fundamental in enabling our executives to handle the multiple stressors that they face on a daily basis. Now, certainly, it's really a lot better to be able to work with a leader that's not as stressed out, right? I mean, someone that has a positive attitude when they face a stressor, they have a can-do attitude, that we can do this, we can get it done. Those are the kind of leaders that employees love to work with at Edwards, and in fact help with our retention of top talent along the way.
Yeah. So I understand that the executive leadership team at Edwards must be really something special. I'd like to bring up the next graphic. It's making a point of diversity. Eileen, tell us a little bit about this picture before we turn over to Rob, when he will tell us about the Edwards Life Sciences executive leadership team.
Well, this was a fun one that we created together, thinking about a culture where everything is very neat, everybody's sort of the same, they fit together, little squares perfectly, monoculture. And then the other side, of course, being all different shapes and sizes, and you have to work a little harder to fit those pieces together, and yet you have more flexibility. So really, as a metaphor, you have this, a wheel, something round that can move and is flexible with diversity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eileen.
Yeah.
So, Rob, how how does this kind of diverse team impact the growth of a company like Edwards Life Sciences?
Well, it all starts with self-awareness, Maylin. I mean, it's really important that I'm aware of, as a leader, of what I'm strong at and what I'm not so strong at. And how that plays into diversity is when I have an opportunity to fill a new role, or when I start up a new project team and I have to put a collective team of experts together, I look at what I might be strong at and what I might not be so strong at, and make sure that what I'm not so strong at is complemented on my team, because that's really important, right? Oftentimes what people do is they want to hire someone similar to themselves, and sometimes that's where they get in problems. I would say that the number one slowdown for people's careers, and the same thing was true at Edwards, is the lack of self-awareness. So the lack of complementing yourself with people different than yourself, so that you could be even a stronger team than any individual came to bear.
So Rob, when we were talking earlier, you talked about human development as one of the key things that has been your passion, and that you saw becoming Vice President of Human Resources as a chance to show how human development could be integrated into the whole spectrum of human resource in a corporation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and touch back on how trust played a role in human resource development in Edwards Life Sciences?
You look back at my career, before I took on this job, I was the head of the Global Baxter Institute for Training and Development. So I'm a development person. They asked me to come over and be this head of HR person. So I didn't have the deep knowledge in comp, benefits, payroll, recruiting that typically a head of HR has. And so I had to really practice this idea of diversity and be able to say, you know what? I'm going to be able to lead in the development of our culture and the development of our people and the development of teams. But I'm going to hire people smarter than myself that really have the expertise in those areas. And if I didn't do that, if I would have hired people like myself, all people that were into development and talent development, team development, that kind of thing, we wouldn't have got all the technical things done that needed to get done as an HR organization in a fast-growing company.
So we've talked about a lot of the insights and learning that both of you have had in this journey with Edwards Life Sciences. There must have been challenges. This is not just a bed of roses all the way. Would either of you like to say something about the obstacles you faced in this journey?
Oh, for sure there were a lot of challenges along the way. This is where this concept of diversity really comes in, right? It's not easy necessarily to bring in people who are different than yourself. I, for example, am an idea guy. If I would have brought in all kinds of people that were idea people, we would have never got anything done. So I had to surround myself with people who get things done. That's not necessarily the easy pathway to get something done, but it's this concept of go slow to go fast, right? By us working together collaboratively and understanding each other's strengths and each other's weaknesses, we were able to really get a lot more done than any one of us could do as individuals.
I am really struck by what you're saying, is that the very diversity allowed you to overcome the obstacles. And so you kind of make a strength of what other people consider, oh, we have to do this because it's by law. But you're saying diversity allowed you to overcome challenges that would have been difficult if you'd been all of the same ilk.
It was key to our growth. It was key to our growth.
So let's turn back to trust. I'd love for you both to say something about the foundation of trust. What role does that play in the how of leadership?
Well, I've been observing this company and, of course, working with Rob. And I actually think Rob had just so many sort of pithy, deep, and well-expressed gems of wisdom. And it's one thing to have aphorisms or phrases, but it's another to really see that in action. So the ideas of being vulnerable, of revealing oneself, of admitting your own weaknesses, understanding others. So these are words. On the other hand, we're seeing those in action. And so these are elements of trust, and it turns out that trust in the world of innovation and work are behaviors. There's specific behaviors that people are practicing. And what we saw was that this could be ingrained in a company and become part of the culture and part of this innovation engine. And it turns out that all that we heard growing up about being kind and being fair and being open and being clear. I mean, it's very direct culture as well. It's all true. It works.
I am just thrilled to hear this. So, Rob, trust.
Trust, I mean, it was just the absolute foundation of our company, right? I mentioned, or you mentioned earlier, that we make technologies that go inside human beings. It was really important that I created a culture, or helped work with other leaders to create a culture where people were trusted to do things right in a quality way. All it would take is one person to slip up on that, and potentially we have a product out there that goes into a human being and fails, and we have a death on our hands. That would be terrible. And we tried our best to always be working with people to say, do things in ethical ways, don't skip steps for speed's sake, make sure that you're doing things in a quality way. And we had to trust them to do that.
This is wonderful, because Edwards Life Sciences is on the frontier of the new kinds of companies that are coming out as we understand much, much more about the human body and how we can prolong life and increase our quality of life. It reassures me to know that trust is a critical element of any company working in the life sciences, and that the two of you have come together to write this book to make sure that people understand that this is so important, and it's not that difficult. These pictures make it clear. So let's wrap up. Rob, what's next for you?
Well, you know, first of all, I'm spending more time with my family. When you're in part of this crazy executive world, you know, certainly I got a lot of things to rewind here and really be a part more of being a dad. Secondarily, you know, I was just so fortunate to be part of a company where we got to create almost like the gold standard for cultures that really enable innovation. I think now it's time for me to get outside of Edwards and be able to share that, whether that be through coaching or mentoring or doing some speaking engagements at other companies.
So how would you help other organizations learn from what you have done?
You know, I mentioned, you know, I've started my own consulting company now. I do some coaching, some mentoring, and, you know, a little bit of speaking engagements.
Okay. Eileen, what's next for you?
Well, we're working a lot on the book and getting it out there, and then our next book will probably have to do more with visual language and also on, of course, more on trust building exercises.
Thank you, Eileen, for being on